we go. Okay, so we have tonight Megan Lauer, who is the Pendleton Club Operations essentially treasurer, and Rita Strandberg, who is the Pendleton Foundation treasurer and our district treasurer, to provide information to everyone and answer questions, and also hear suggestions from clubs if you have things to share about the club operations and foundation budgeting process. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who is going to kick us off, and Rita, I'm sure, will be joining us shortly.
And so
she's about to log in, just so we know.
Oh, good. Like Debbie said, I'm presenting on the club or operating budgeting process. I'm Pendleton's operating treasurer right now. And just for a quick overview, there's more to that than this, but quick overview of a club or operating is that the monies are used in the operation of the club and in support of the club's members, and the income primarily comes from members' annual dues and fees. Usually, there are some other income areas, and then foundations, usually the monies are used for service programs and projects and the fundraising activities related to them. That income is from those fundraising activities as well as donations and any grants that your club may receive. These should be separate accounts and are usually separate legal entities. So for the club or operating budget, I was going to start with some income lines. So some that you may see in your budget are cash forward, which is just the money left over from last year's budget. Dues, which is your annual fees times the number of members that you're expecting. Conference fundraisers is another line item we have. Each club, I think, does this a little bit different. For Pendleton, we have a 50-50 raffle we do during our meetings, as well as piggy bank to put money in if we want to make announcements or brags about personal stuff at the end of meetings. And both of those go towards our conference fundraiser income item. Then we have a membership income line item, and that's where I place income for replacement pins, aprons, name tags, or member event fees. So we had, like, for example, last year we had a Fifth Wednesday where we did a leather workshop. And so everyone paid like $5 towards that. And so that's where that income line item is, where I put that income. And then we have a miscellaneous income line item, and that in general should be budgeted at 0. Because any expected income should have an assigned line that's more descriptive than miscellaneous. This is miscellaneous really is for one-time type events, which do happen, and you should have a place to put them when they do happen. Then, so for some sample expense line items, dues to international and district, using the same number of members as you used for your income line item. The international convention fee, and then we also have district conference, the line items for our membership and hospitality committees, postage and supplies, public relations, miscellaneous expense. Miscellaneous expense should be minimal, but maybe not 0. It's a lot more common to have an expense that comes up that doesn't quite fit somewhere else. And you don't, the key to all of these is you don't want to overestimate your income or underestimate your expenses, if at all possible. Some other,
Before you go on to your next slide, because it seems like some people are taking notes. We will be uploading the recording onto the district website, and we can also make the PowerPoint available to email out to anyone on the call tonight if you would like that. So absolutely go ahead and take notes as Megan and Rita are talking. Just know that we will provide those resources to you as well.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. And then all of our clubs are very different. I know Pendleton is really strange because we are longstanding as well as a very large group. So we also have additional line items. Your club may operate slightly different, and you may have other line items that are of interest to your club. Our club has an income line item for fundraisers and then expense line items for meals, because we do still have a meal with our meeting. The corporation and charitable activities fees, the membership yearbook, we do print a handbook for our club members. Club enhancement, that's usually where we put money, expenses related to supporting our members. So bereavement gifts or celebratory gifts often go in club enhancement. And then we do pay for our meeting room. And then computer software, we provide our treasurer with a computer and with a QuickBooks subscription. And so the computer is not an every year expense, it's once every however many years they last. But the software is annual. And then storage areas, and our club also sets aside an amount of money to reimburse our members if they choose to go to international convention every other year. Again, each club may have a slightly different approach, but for Pendleton, our budget committee members are the operating treasurer, and then the current president and operating related committee chairs, and the incoming president and operating related committee chairs. So for Pendleton, that's membership, hospitality, and PR. All are the committee chairs that I turn to when making that. And then additional support and feedback is provided by our membership committee, which is where our dues structure originates from, as well as the other club board members. So the actual steps I take in drafting the operating budget is I first pull the current year's budget and the last 12 months of actuals, again, depending on your club. And you may not have 12 months of actuals that reflect your current structure. You may be in a huge growth phase, or you may be a newer club, or there's all sorts of oddities that can happen. So best to have both, but at least one of those. And then I verify our required expenses. So again, we do lunches. And so I make sure that either I or one of the presidents have talked to who will be providing our lunches and verify that our lunch rate is remaining the same, and talk to we are at the convention center, so talk to the convention center and make sure our room fees staying the same, those type of things. And then I estimate the expected income based on current, or if you've already changed your fee structure for the following year, your planned fee structure, and your best guess at the number of renewing members. Again, for Pendleton, normally by the time I start this, we know that there's a few that are not going to renew. And so I take those off of our total. And then usually that's a good rule of thumb. Again, for our club, we have such a high number and we get so many new members throughout the year that even if we have a few more drop, we usually gain enough through the year that it kind of erases any difference that you may find. Your club may be different if you have less members, because having one member add or drop may have a more significant change on your budget overall than ours does. Because one person out of 80 for us is a lot different than one person out of 20 for a different club. And then I do those first 3 steps in that order, because if I know that our required expenses are changing significantly, then, or that our number of renewing members is changing significantly, then when I talk to the budget committee about their requests, I can mention, hey, it looks like we're going to have an increase in expenses. If I need to lower your amount, is that something that your committee can handle? Like, can you absorb a cut? Or, hey, it looks like we may have more money. Is there something that you're interested in adding? Or, that type of discussion can happen when I talk to the budget committee. And that's why I do those first 3 as the first 3. And then as step 5, I plug in the information from steps 2 and 3 into the budget sheet. So I plug in the required expenses and my estimated income. And then I use the information from 1 and 4. So using what we actually spent in the last 12 months and what the committees have requested to do my best to come up with a balanced budget. And for clubs that are really steady, it's going to be pretty easy. If you have similar expenses, similar activity levels, this works really well. If you can't get to a balanced budget, then you're going to have to go back to your budget committee and possibly your membership committee or whoever is in charge of your due structure about how to address it. So for Pendleton last year, we had absorbed an increased cost for 1 year. And so we had to deal with it last year, and we had to overhaul a lot of pieces of the budget. So it took a lot of me. I had to draft 2 or 3 different budgets and say, okay, well, if we do this change, this is how it all cascades down. And if we do this change, this is how it cascades down, and have those discussions and go back and forth. And with changing dues, then that has to go through the approval process all the way through the board and membership. So it can take a while to do all those pieces. So there's a lot of ways to address balancing the budget, and that's why you have the committee and use them. And, it may be trying something new. It may be taking something out that's underused. And it's do your best, and that's why you then take it to your board and get the feedback. It's not all on your shoulders as a treasurer. It's not all on your shoulders as the budget committee. And it is very valuable, even if you are, quote unquote, just a member. Your feedback is important, because it just comes down to you have a human doing their best, trying to come up with the best numbers they can. And it's never going to be exact. And if it is, you should probably buy a lottery ticket. So the example timeline is, so this month I am identifying the budget committee, letting them know that they are the budget committee, because they tend to forget. Request committees discuss the needs at their next meeting, so that I get that committee feedback by the middle of March. And I know I'm also on the membership committee for ours. And so I've already said, hey, by the way, we need to discuss new member fees because our expenses for initiation are currently not quite equal to what we're charging for new member fees. Do we need to address that? Because that'll affect my budget. So I do, like, if I've noticed that there's something that's not quite right or working not as smoothly as possible, I am noting that to the committees at this point. And then that also helps me identify if we need to discuss a dues change. And then in March, I asked the board about any planned special events. If you're celebrating a club anniversary or something, or if your city maybe is, and you're gonna need more advertising for something. And I prepare the first draft of the budget in completion in March. And then I can have time to work with the membership committee. And then, so April board meeting, I'm presenting what's probably a second or later draft to the board for their approval. And their approval may come with, you know, approved, but change this or lower this, whatever. And so I make those recommended changes if there are any, and then I present to the club for approval at our April business meeting. And you may be the type of person that goes, but we don't know enough by April. How can we do that? You should be able to get close enough looking at the actuals to have a pretty solid plan by April. And then you do have the ability in May, if needed, to adjust your income. So if you've actually had a lot more people drop, or you were able to have a lot higher number for a carryover, those type of things. If you got a late notice about one of your required fees increasing, you can make all those changes in May and present an amended budget in May, so that you have a really solid budget to hit the ground running with as of June 1st. And that's all I have. It's really pretty simple, because, you know, other than the soon to be Coeur d'Alene Chartered Club, all of our clubs have had more than 12 months operating history. My biggest piece of advice is don't make it harder than it has to be.
Do we have any questions for Megan on the operating side? I know different clubs do things in different ways and have their own timelines. Anything that anyone wants to ask about before we switch over to Rita and foundation budgeting?
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Diane.
Thank you, Megan, or is it Megan?
Megan.
Megan. I kind of got in here late because I couldn't find where I could zoom in. But anyway, does your operating budget for the club, does it incorporate a website expense or marketing expenses, or how are those paid for?
So,
Foundation or operating?
so we don't have any expenses related to a website.
Our district covers the website expenses for our District 12 clubs. So unless a club is choosing to go out on their own to do something, none of our clubs in District 12 would have a website expense.
Okay.
But we do, so this is actually the budget and how I proposed it last year. So I included the previous year's budget and the previous year's actuals, and then this was for an amended budget, so I have the original and the updated. But you will see that we have a public relations amount, and so that's where some of our like advertising type goes, as well as we also have the First Citizens table. So that's kind of an advertising expense for us. We decorate a table for Pendleton's First Citizens banquet. And so we have that line item too. So yes, the generic marketing expenses do need to be, like for Pendleton, we do put it in our operating, but any marketing expenses related to a specific fundraiser should go with that fundraiser, which is usually within the foundation. Because it's
Okay.
usually fundraisers are for service projects.
Right.
And so that should be usually within the foundation, but like the general like membership brochures, business cards, that type of advertising expense should come out of probably your operating, because it's generic. And then if you have that space in operating, then that allows you to have more money within foundation to actually spend directly on service.
Is this QuickBook or operating budget spreadsheet, is this in the PowerPoint presentation?
It is not in the PowerPoint, but I was going to include it with my email to Debbie for it
Ah,
to be able to be shared so that you had an example. And ours, I would expect, is probably a little bit bigger than a lot of other clubs would actually need.
mm-hmm.
Like we have, and some things just won't make sense. So like our annex, we have a building that we use for storage that we call the annex. So it's labeled that, but before, when we just had storage units, it was a storage unit and we had that line item there instead.
I see. Okay. Well,
Pendleton
thank
does
you.
have a very large club and a very large budget, much more so than the vast majority of clubs. But what's in there, you know, a lot of clubs will have a more simplified budget, but you can still use all of these different breakouts as examples if you need ideas on.
Yes.
And in answer to your question, and Rita can confirm this when she's talking too, between operations and foundation, you really need to think foundation is all about your service projects. There are operational expenses that can be tied into service if it doesn't also tie into your club. So for example, there's post office box on here on the operations side. If your foundation has a PO box expense, then it goes on the foundation. If your club only has one PO box and you use it for foundation and operations, needs to go into operations. Anything that ties in at all to operations of your club needs to be, if it's duplicated, it needs to be on the operations side of things.
So you can use operating funds to help support your foundation. You should not be using your foundation funds to support your club.
So if the foundation has a PO box and they're paying for it out of their operating expenses, that should not be the case?
No, that's okay.
Yeah, if it's used for their foundation and not for your club operations. So if your club has two PO boxes, or your club mail goes to a particular person and you're not paying for a PO box, but if the foundation has its own PO box, that's absolutely legitimate as a foundation expense.
Okay.
I have a question concerning that. We have one PO box that's used by both the foundation and the club, but we split the cost between the foundation and the club.
You could
Is
you
that
can do that
okay?
too, right, Rita?
Okay.
Yep, that's absolutely okay. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other operating questions? And you can always email me. You'll probably have to think about it because my email is Margaret Lauer.
Oh,
I'm legally not a Megan. Um, but I am listed on the district website because I'm the social media person for the district.
You can put
Which also
your
means-
email into the email that we send out with some of this information to Megan, in case anyone wants to reach out to you, and same with Rita, if you're both okay with that.
Yes. And so if you end up with questions for me, please feel free to reach out. And same thing, if you have questions, you can also message the district Instagram or Facebook, because I get those too, and also direct any other questions to the correct person if they come in. And so I'll stop sharing so that Rita can take it.
I was thinking actually, if you wanted to keep sharing, if it's not too late, your example timeline is actually the same exact one for the foundation.
Okay, let me.
Sorry, I was trying
no,
to
it's
unmute in time.
I do a lot of presenting. I just am currently using my TV as my second screen.
I love that technology is your jam because the older I get, the more it's not my jam anymore.
We all bring
It's not an
skills, don't
option.
we?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. There you go.
I saw Megan's PowerPoint presentation. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so awesome. And then I started looking at it and I'm like, hey, this is awesome because the foundation like mirrors it. The important thing to just remember about the club versus the foundation is that your foundation is the charitable nonprofit organization. And so any of those monies are going to be from donations, fundraising activities, and your service projects. And so it's going to be a separate entity, and you need to make sure that any of those funds are going into your service projects and that you're issuing people donation receipts because they are going to be tax deductible. And so you want to make sure that all those funds are being used appropriately to keep your charitable nonprofit status. And the more people that you can get involved in the budgeting process, the better. You want everybody to feel included, and there's so many great ideas that the more people you can include, the better it is. We run on the same budgeting cycle that's going to be June 1st through May 31st. And so it is very, very important that you have your budget approved before May 31st. Ideally, have it approved at the beginning of May because you want to be ready to roll with that budget on June 1st. And that budget does need to be approved by the membership. So I'm the same as Megan, where in February, I start reaching out to our committees, and that would be all of our service committees. In Pendleton, we have a ton of them, bless everybody's hearts. So we have like our Feed the Child backpack program, our care that's for homeless children in town. We have our literacy committees, our ASK committees, that is grants that are directed directly to the school and teachers, community service grants that are given. And so in February, I start reaching out to the previous or current committee chairs, asking them what are they projecting for the next year? Have they reached out to their new committee chair? If they're not going to be chairing following year, we need to bring in that new chairperson as well. And we need to talk about, is there any projects you're discontinuing, or is there any new ones that you're starting that are going to require new funds? And we want to look at the income and the expenses and see how it was in the past past and what they're projecting for the future. So more people you can have in that discussion, the better. And
Rita, can I jump in with one thing? Sorry to interrupt. A lot of clubs don't know who their committee chairs are going to be in February, and that's okay, because sometimes that gets worked out in March or April. Keep in mind, you can have a committee talk even if you don't know who the chair is going to be, because most of the time the committees tend to do similar things in the coming year. So even if you don't know who the upcoming committee chair is going to be, that committee can still ballpark what they're going to be doing and if they need extra income or anticipate extra expenses.
yes, absolutely. Just because you don't know who the head's going to be, it still should be headed down the path as the previous year, should have an idea of what the goals are. So anybody you can get involved in that is great. And in March, then I look at what the I'm looking at the previous budget from the previous year, and I draft together a sample budget and take that to the foundation board first. And the foundation board does input. There could be changes at that point, things that they see. And from there, once they have a recommendation for approval, then we would be taking it to the entire membership and presenting that the very latest, the beginning of May, so that we can get any additional revisions done and have it approved so that June 1st, we're ready to roll. Is there any questions at that point or anything?
Dina does, please. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. To kind of piggyback on the governor, my club has had an issue with, the time frame was the budgets and whatever, because of what Debbie just said, that, I don't have a new board yet, and it's the president's responsibility to appoint the new or the chairs of the committees. So are you suggesting that our current committee chairs and committees meet, as well as who I'm pretty sure is going to be, as of June 1st, our committee chairs and our new board?
Yeah, absolutely. I would use your current board.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot of times you don't know yet who the new ones are going to be.
Right.
And the committee should be doing similar things, and the current chair should be passing the torch on to the new person with the ideas and the guidelines. And so you should be able to get a fairly good idea for the budget off of the current board. Or
Okay.
current chair.
I want to toss in an
Mhm.
idea too, and I'm going to use Karen Rose as an example. So Karen is the president-elect of Pendleton. She will become the president of our club. She'll be elected in at our March elections, and she'll take over in May or beginning of June, when the transition happens. But if you have a person that is going to become your club president, and most of our clubs do, although some it's a little wishy-washy at times, but if using again Karen as an example, Karen knows she's going to become president. She can start talking right now to people on different committees, on the service committee, on the literacy committee, on the whatever committees that you have, and say, or to the current committee chairs, do you know who is likely to become a chair? And start getting that in place, because it is actually the president's option to appoint chairs to the committees. Different clubs do it in different ways. So, your club may do signups and you just hope someone signs up to be a chair, or you have someone that wants to be a chair or that has been a chair and wants to do it again. Some clubs have people that, have been chairing a committee for 10 years. That's actually not a good idea. Having a transition of leadership is a good idea, and turning over some of those leaders. So an incoming president can start talking with people on, have you thought about chairing this committee? Or I know you vice chaired it this year. Are you planning on stepping up to chair it in the coming year? And get a feel for that kind of thing. And then that person, even if it hasn't become official yet, can make sure that they have input into that committee budgeting process, knowing that they might be chairing it. Or you can wait until you do whatever your club process is, but that's another opportunity to think about a different way of leadership and having your chairs starting to get worked out early enough to be able to have actual input into the committee decision making for money.
Absolutely. And the flip side of that is beyond the committees, you need to know what the income side is going to be. And really important to bring in your club presidents and your club membership, because whoever's in charge of activities, you need to know that those are going to continue for the next year. Do they foresee that the income from those is going to be the same? Because the income side is just as important as, so really important to get everybody involved so you know if you're looking at having the same amount of income to work with for those groups. If there's not
you.
any questions from there, the and
Did you want to share your screen?
Rita froze.
let's see.
She's
Did I-
frozen on my screen.
Okay, it says I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see it by chance?
There it is.
Are we good?
It's up there now.
Okay, great. So kind of like Megan said, this is the kind of work with the Pendleton Foundation. And so it might be a little overwhelming just because there's so many different committees. But
Can you enlarge that a little bit?
Thank
Just so
you.
the numbers are a little bit bigger for people, please. Thanks.
Did that work?
Sure.
Okay. And when you're working with your budgets, sometimes like our district budgets, we do with QuickBooks for the Pendleton operating and the Pendleton Foundation, we do it off of an Excel spreadsheet. So you can, whatever works best for your foundations and clubs. Don't feel like you have to use QuickBooks or you have to use the forms we're using. Use whatever you feel comfortable with. One thing that is different from the foundation to operating is there's going to be unrestricted funds and restricted funds. And unrestricted funds are going to be funds that you received from your service projects or donations that weren't earmarked for a specific committee. And so those each year you're going to get assigned to a committee based on what their needs are. And if those funds aren't used by the end of the year, then you get to reallocate them in the next budget. Whereas on the second page of our budget, we have the restricted funds. And the restricted funds, those committees have received those donations that are specific for their committees. The donor wanted that specific committee to receive those funds, or that committee has done a specific project where they raise those funds themselves. And so those funds are restricted. And if they don't use those funds by May 31st, then they are going to carry over in the next budget specific to that committee. So those stay as restricted funds for that committee. Does anybody have any questions on restricted or unrestricted funds?
Dina does.
Okay. Bring it on.
And you know what? I am not shy. That's how
Okay.
I learn these things, by asking things.
Exactly.
So
That's
just for
exactly right.
clarification, when you say restricted, let's say I have $10,000 that someone gave to Kid Shop.
Yep.
So when you say restricted, that $10,000 can go to Kid Shop and Kid Shop only.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
So if someone gave me or us $10,000, said, Dean, do what you want, that would be unrestricted, and then we could just put it wherever.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I'm also going to clarify
Clarify
that,
that.
Dina. So if someone gives you $100 or $10,000 and says, do what you want with it, you need to find out from that person, Do you want it to be just for service projects and we can do what we want, or can it be used for operations?
Okay,
Anything that's being donated to your club, and you can take donations for club operations, but they are not tax deductible to the person because our foundations are 501c3s and donations to our foundations are tax deductible. But you are allowed to take a $10,000 donation if you were to be so lucky, and it can go into operations, but you do need to know the intent of the donor on whether they're okay with it being operations, thus not tax deductible, or used any way you want, where some can go to foundation things or operations, or they don't care what service project you use it for, but it needs to essentially go to your foundation for some kind of service. Does that make sense?
yes, but one more clarification, please, if I may, Governor. So if someone wants to give us $10,000, said, here, Dean, here's $10,000, it's for your operations. That is not tax deductible to that person?
Correct.
Correct.
Wow, really?
Because it's being, your stuff that goes into a foundation is tax deductible. Our clubs are we 501c4s? I think we're 501c4.
501c4, yep.
Yes, but
Okay.
it's not, donations to your club operations are not tax deductible. You should still give them a thank you note, but they are not tax deductible to operations of your club.
Another quickie, if I may, please, and I apologize because it's
Yeah,
coming
you don't
today.
need to
So
apologize for questions.
we're getting ready to do a fundraiser of selling a Visa gift card because right now our operations budget, I'll be blunt, sucks. So I've got 2 donors that are willing to donate the Visa gift card. Can they get a tax donation for doing that or no? Because they're purchasing the Visa gift card.
What?
So if
that make
it's with
sense?
the intention of gaining money for your operations,
Yes, ma'am.
no.
Okay. And I'm going to assume when you saying that, Megan, is that when people purchase these raffle tickets from us, they're not entitled to a tax write-off slip either.
Correct.
Okay.
So because you have to be a 501c3 to qualify for that donation tax exemption thing. And our foundations are set up as C3s, but clubs, because they're membership organizations, are not C3s, they're C4s. And there's a bunch of other C's in there that are also not tax deductible.
So
Um,
if someone was, I'm sorry, Megan.
No, go ahead.
If someone was going to donate that Visa gift card to benefit your kids shop, and the money, the proceeds from that were going to kids shop, and someone gets that gift card, then that would be tax deductible, correct,
Okay.
Megan and Rita? Because the proceeds are going to a service project through
Okay.
your foundation. But if you're doing that fundraiser as a club operations, it's not tax deductible.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. I have a question about a solicitation letter that our foundation board mails to our Chamber of Commerce members. And in that letter, we have the different service projects that we have active in our club, and they can choose where they want to designate their money. There's also a line item that says Altrusa Choice, and our foundation board members are dividing up percentage-wise those undesignated foundation dollars and just putting them back into those service projects. And there's been concern there on behalf of the club members that we, as a club, should determine where those undesignated funds can be used opposed to the board members. I don't know what your thoughts are there, but there's some discrepancies. I know, Debbie, you said to contact the person that donated. Well, we're probably talking about 15 people maybe that were that mailed in their donation that was undesignated. to call and ask them what their intentions were.
If they're donating it to your foundation and they had an option to check a box or write a name and they chose not to do it, then you can safely assume, if you provided them with the opportunity to designate it and they didn't, you can safely assume that they're going to let you decide how you're going to use it. I just mean sometimes you get a check, and we've had that in our club where we get a check in the mail and it's just a check. And so then you need to find out, thank you very much, what was this for? So that you
Okay.
know. But if you send out a solicitation letter from your foundation to the public and they have an opportunity to identify what they're going to use it for, and they don't, then, so long as it goes into your foundation and not your club operations, you're fine.
Okay.
And we can say more about how that gets used in a minute. I don't know if Rita wants to address that at all.
Yeah. So I was kind of, in Pendleton, we have a fundraising committee that was started. And part of that was because we got big enough that there were committees that were sending out letters like that, so asking for donations. And we started to feel like there were too many going out. And so our community was being bombarded with them. And two, the donations started coming in and it was hard to keep track of where it was going and which letter it belonged to. So I think it is important to have a fundraising committee or approval so that there's everybody's on the same page. And I know from the foundation, that's kind of what I was talking. It's really important to get as many people as you can involved in the budgeting process, because it is important for the committees to feel like they have a say on where the unrestricted funds are being allocated. Like one of our big fundraising projects is our RV parking for Roundup. And all of that income is unrestricted income. So when I'm starting to build the budget for the upcoming year, that's a lot of money to divide between all of the committees. And it shouldn't be one person or the foundation board that's making that decision. It should be a group of people that's making the recommendation so that everybody feels good about it and it is going to the right spot.
And
So
just,
I want to add on to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Megan.
I was going to add on, and maybe it's the same thing you were going to say, Debbie, that in Pendleton, when there is large amounts that come in that are unrestricted foundation funds, Pendleton does usually vote as our whole membership on Rita and the foundation board's recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So we still include our entire club in those. So we do have a chance as an entire club to give that feedback. The foundation is not its own little pod.
Yes.
It's very much, there's a lot of overlap in Pendleton between the foundation and the club. And really the only separation is with the budgets and the treasurers, but those final decisions on everything, still we try and let that rest with the entire membership.
Part of the reason I asked Rita and Megan to present tonight is because Pendleton and some other clubs, but Pendleton does a great job of involving its full membership in both budget processes, and that makes a huge difference. Now, I am going to say, for what Rita and Megan said, officially, legally, on the Altrusa International level, and I believe tied into the IRS, your foundation board does not have to get Altrusa member input into those kind of decisions. If you get some chunk of money and it needs to be allocated, as Diane mentioned, officially, the foundation board, as a board, can choose how that money is going to get allocated. However, that is not in the spirit of Altrusa. Usually it is Altrusans sending out the fundraising letters, or Altrusans doing fundraising events that brings, like our RV parking in Pendleton, that brings the money to the club, and that money is going into the foundation. It is typically, by one way or another, raised by Altrusans And the spirit of that is that Altrusans, our clubs, should be able to review those budgets, should be able to provide input into how that money is used. Some of our club foundation boards, like this is foundation money, the foundation board is the one that decides how to use it legally. That is correct, but that is not how Altrusa International wants business to be done in our club foundations. You can choose to do it, but you are leaving out the people that are actually working on getting those funds. So does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I'd say communication is so key. One thing that's really cool that I've seen in Pendleton is by the communication, there may be a committee that has an extra $500 that they were given in their unrestricted budget. And they get to this point in the year where they're looking at March or April, and they're not going to be using those funds by May 31st. If we have another committee that has a request or that needs funds, that communication, we've had committees that come forward and say, well, we're not going to use it and you have this request. And so we will vote as a membership to move from the budget from one committee to the other committee. And so it's really important to communicate and do the right thing.
May I ask a quickie, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Dina.
Sorry again, but I'm not sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You have a member who has donated a humongous shop to store all of your service project product items, books, kid shop stuff, whatever. If we were to go out here in Albany and rent the same size, it would cost us $400 a month. This person is allowing us to use their shop. Are they entitled to a tax write-off?
In-kind donation.
In-kind donation. And
Okay.
I wouldn't have, I have to check with the tax laws or an accountant, but an accountant would be able to help with the exact amount that they could write off. But it's
Okay.
definitely a write-off as an in-kind donation.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think it's like, okay, if I go down to this place, it's $60 a month. I don't think it's quite equivalent that way. And so, yeah, check with an accountant. And Diane Whitman has been an accountant, and she is an Altrusan in Gig Harbor.
Okay.
And Ann DeFrancisco is an accountant, and she's an Altrusan in Longview Kelso. So we do have, and we may have others within our organization. So you could double check with some of those people, but you absolutely, they can get an in-kind donation.
Great, thank you.
Rita, did you have any other content you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty much my notes that I had.
Do we have any other questions for Megan or Rita on club operations or foundation budgets? Yeah, Therese.
Yeah, it's not really a question, but more of a comment. So within our process in our club, our service committee meets and our Ways and Means committee meets and has conversations and builds a proposed budget to put forth for foundation in terms of fund allocation. That comes to our finance committee. And when we have that big finance committee meeting, we open it up for all of our members to come and have input if they feel they haven't had an opportunity or sufficient opportunity to discuss at the committee level. So that hopefully by the end of all of that, we have it ironed out enough so that when it goes to foundation, it's pretty solid and people feel like they've had an opportunity to at least be heard.
That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, along those lines, one comment I was going to try and remember to mention is Rita and I each talked about the way that we do it, but all of our clubs are different, and none of our clubs are wrong in how they Altrusa. And there's a lot of possible ways to correctly budget for your Altrusa. And so if you are struggling with a budgeting process, hopefully we gave you some really great ideas, but just like your comment just highlighted, your club may be doing something different that works really well for you. And if that's the case, keep doing what works really well for you.
I do want to talk about, with international, if you do not have a budget approved on June 1st, you are number one out of compliance with Altruis International. Some clubs start very late. If you do start very late and you run into problems, then you don't have an approved budget. If you don't have an approved budget, you can spend no money. Until your club goes through the process and approves that budget, you cannot expend any funds in June, July, whenever it is you get around to it. And so you do, whether you start in February or March and, you have a short process or a really long one and you get input from your members and all that, make sure by May 31st that you've got your budget approved, just so you're good to go on June 1st. Your new officers and committee chairs know what their funds are and you can run with it. And remember too, a budget is your best estimation of things. And so life happens. Sometimes you get bigger donations. Sometimes a fundraiser doesn't do as well as it did in the past years. We make our best guesses when our treasurers and committees put this information together. Rarely is it exactly right year to year. So any other questions from anyone?
I'm sorry to ask these questions, but our club is really struggling with this process. And we don't know, the chair people usually come up with a proposed budget. And it's not, they've probably, I hope, have talked to their members, but there's no direction. And it's like we propose to the foundation what we want to do instead of proposing it to our members and letting them add some things as to what they'd like to see. And there's not an open dialogue. Do you all have any suggestions? The relationship is exactly what Debbie mentioned. The foundation is completely separate, and they have given us the feel as a club that they have the power, they have the purse strings to make the final decision. Like, we're getting ready to have an anniversary and we want to give quite a bit of money to some nonprofits, but our committee feels like we have to go before the board and ask permission to see if we can do this in 2026 when we have this anniversary party. And I just think to myself, well, that's what we want to do as a club. Shouldn't the foundation rubber stamp it? We're just constantly going to the board. Not constantly, but I would say there's 3 or 4 times we've gone to the board throughout the year for things like that. So,
Rita or Megan, do you want to, or anyone else, does anyone want to share anything on that?
And Rita will have all the official on that. But that, really you're doing the correct process. Like, it will be going to the board or whoever is creating the budget to request it. It sounds like they're not offering you enough opportunity to do it ahead of time. And I know from a treasurer standpoint, no one's ever going to tell me they want less money. And there's not always more income for that. And so there is a little bit of stress there where, when we were overhauling some parts of the budget last year and trying to figure out, do we raise dues? We don't want to raise dues. How do we fix this? All that. Where I had to go to the hospitality committee and say, so about fifth Wednesdays. And it was not a fun conversation to have. So I guess part of my thing is, do realize that we want, I think I speak for both Rita and I, we want to give everyone all the money that they want, but we only have so many poker chips we're playing with. And so sometimes it's easy to go through the budget process and forget to ask. Because if you have a club that's running really well and really steady and doesn't have a lot of new or old things, that you kind of go through this rubber stamp process and you forget to say, oh yeah, does anyone have any special requests for this year? We did have that problem a couple of years. I think actually the year I was president, the budget process just ran so smoothly that then we had people saying, well, how did you do that? And we're like, well, we did talk to everyone, but so just so you guys know, on the leadership side of things, sometimes it's easy to forget. So I'm glad that you guys are going and requesting.
I'd also toss out two different things, Diane. It looks like Margie, you're going to say something too. One is consider your foundation board elections. And if you have people that have been on your foundation board for a long time, maybe you need to check the foundation bylaws, because most foundations have terms. And if you get some new blood onto a foundation, to change that up, if it's a culture thing, because some of our clubs do have that exact thing where the foundation board members think this is our money and we get to decide how to use it. Officially, that is true as a board member. They are legally responsible to make sure the foundation funds are used in the way they're supposed to be used. And that is on the foundation board. However, it is not in the spirit of how the fundraising happens. And if you're talking about something for 2026 for a big whatever, and you know about it now, you have time now to potentially budget in some amount. And maybe it's not as much as you thought, but there should be an open conversation. And as a club president, and a foundation president, you could have a big discussion in a club meeting on, this is how it's really supposed to work. And we haven't done it as much this way, but we're going to start moving forward in this, where it's a cooperative discussion with input from everybody. If you can talk your foundation board into that. And even if you can't, maybe you have that club discussion anyway, so the foundation board hears that that's what the club members want, and they hear that in other clubs that is how it's done and how it's intended to be done. And that might help depending on what the issue is with your foundation.
I was going to say that as I'm looking at our foundation board, in addition to the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, we also have 7 director positions. And it is so great that the variety of those directors. So we have new members, old members, and as I look at where those members serve on committees, there's people who are on the literacy committee, people are on care, people are on Feed the Child. And so they're bringing representation of each of those committees and just a different variety so that everybody's represented on the foundation board. So important to run for those foundation positions to bring that to the table.
Marge, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that it sounds like her project is a much bigger project, but I know, like, within the literacy committee, we have some restricted money that can only be used for books, but then we have some unrestricted money, and we have done some different things this year. And maybe that might be something her club wants to look at, is that not all of a committee's money is restricted, and give that committee a little bit of freedom to make some decisions that make sense to that committee, and it really does open up some creative ideas to have some unrestricted money to use.
We have run a few minutes over. If anyone has extra questions, I'm sure Megan and Rita would stay on for a few extra minutes. But thank you for participating tonight. Hopefully this was helpful, for information. I will make sure that we upload the recording, and we'll send out the PowerPoint. And I made notes on a couple other things that we were going to send out and include, if it's okay, Rita and Megan will include your emails in that too, in case anyone wants to reach out to the two of you. Any other final comments or questions before we end for the evening? No? Okay, thanks for joining us tonight, everyone. And Megan and Rita, thank you very much for taking the time to coordinate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Hey, Dina,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Dina, did you sign off already?
I think she did.
Oh my gosh, that never happened.
Fastest time ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many people